As Americans move closer to the 2026 midterm elections, the primary season is beginning to reveal more than just the candidates who will appear in November's ballots. It is offering early clues about the political mood of the country and about the future balance of power in Washington. Republicans continue to benefit from Donald Trump's strong influence over the party, while Democrats are showing signs of renewed electoral energy and growing appetite for change. Yet both parties are also confronting internal divisions over ideology, leadership, and strategy. The biggest question may therefore not simply be who wins the most seats, but whether either party can control both chambers of Congress. If Democrats regain the House while Republicans retain the Senate, could Washington become even more divided? And what would that mean for the rest of Trump's presidency? I'm Ram Morsi, and welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
The 2026 Senate elections are shaping up as a closely watched battle for control of the chamber. According to the Wall Street Journal, Republicans currently hold a 53 to 47 majority, meaning Democrats need a net gain of 4 seats to take control. Of the 35 Senate seats being contested, Republicans are defending 22, giving Democrats several opportunities to make gains. Key battlegrounds include Georgia, Maine, Michigan, North Carolina, and Texas, while traditionally Republican states are also drawing competitive Democrat challenges. The outcome will hinge on a relatively small number of competitive races, making candidate strength, turnout, and the national political environment crucial as November approaches. The 2026 primaries are offering early clues about November, revealing divisions within both parties and raising the possibility that Americans could elect a Congress split between Democrats and Republicans.
As the United States moves towards the November 2026 midterm elections, the primary season is beginning to offer an early glimpse of the political battle ahead. Rather than producing a clear national realignment, recent contests suggest that both parties are navigating internal tensions while voters remain deeply polarized. For Democrats, victories by progressive candidates in states such as Michigan and Minnesota have demonstrated renewed energy within the party, yet defeats elsewhere have underscored an unresolved debate over whether Democrats should move further left or prioritize moderate voters in competitive districts. Republicans, meanwhile, remain strongly influenced by President Donald Trump. His endorsement continued to shape primary races, but recent results also suggest that his support is not always decisive. That could become significant in November, when Republican candidates must appeal beyond Trump's core base to independents and suburban voters. The central battle is likely to be for the House, where Democrats need only a small number of seats to regain control. The Senate presents a tougher challenge, with the electoral maps favoring Republicans. That raises the possibility of a divided Congress, Democrats controlling the House while Republicans retain the Senate. Such an outcome would transform the final years of Trump's presidency, strengthening congressional oversight while making major legislation far more difficult to advance.
The primaries are offering early clues about November, exposing divisions within both parties. Democrats showed renewed progressive energy, while Republicans remain closely aligned with Trump, though his endorsements are not always decisive. With Democrats needing only a few seats to win the House, while Republicans retain an advantage in the Senate, could the next Congress be divided and become a stronger check on presidential powers? Joining us from Washington is Ginger Chapman, a political analyst, and from Washington, D.C. is Matthew Van Dam, author and journalist. Thank you both for joining here this evening. Ms. Chapman, let's start with you here. Now, the primaries are often described as an early referendum on the political mood. What are the current results so far telling us about the direction of the 2026 electorate?
Well, first, thank you, Ms. Raham, for having us today. Greetings to your viewers and your other guests. And what we are seeing is the American electorate is divided on both sides, Democrats and Republicans. The voters are divided. We are seeing an anti-incumbent push. Many voters are disillusioned with the establishment and with incumbents. And we're also seeing a deepening generational divide where younger voters on both sides of the political aisle are breaking away from the establishment. So we're seeing this in the Republican Party where Donald Trump's nationalism, the Donald Trump nationalism, populism at the beginning of his second term is now receding and is being replaced with a more pragmatic, a focus on electability and pragmatism. So whereas Donald Trump used to be the kingmaker in the Republican Party, now we're seeing some of his endorsements are falling flat. Some of his endorsements are still persuasive, but whoever Trump endorses in the primary elections has to go on and compete in the general election for the broader electorate. So both parties are walking a fine line between electing extremists or radicals or hardliners in the primary elections, but then the primary candidates have to go on and win in the general election with the broader population of voters. And another trend we're seeing is independents are becoming more powerful, especially over the last couple of years. The independents have become a decisive voting bloc, and they're also pulling people from both parties. Disaffected Republicans and disaffected Democrats are joining the independents. That makes them more powerful, but it also makes them it makes the independents harder to pin down because many of them are voting along social justice, social protections, economic reforms, whereas many of the Republican-leaning independents are voting along traditional conservative lines. So this election, the 2026 midterms, are going to be very volatile. It is likely that Democrats will pick up some seats in the House. They are going to struggle to pick up seats or to pick up a majority in the Senate.
Okay, Mr. Van, let's get your take as well here. Now, we're seeing Democrats, pushing these candidates that are considered progressive, the so-called socialist Democrats. How do you see this? Because we're seeing a divide as well, that these candidates are not taking, super PAC money and are considering themselves as the socialist Democrats, while, the traditional old guard of the Democrats are not too happy with these new candidates.
No, not. The far left has been taking over the Democratic Party since at least George McGovern's unsuccessful run for president against Richard Nixon in 1972. The pace has accelerated in recent years. There is a visible swing to the left within the Democratic Party. For example, in June, New York City's radical Mayor Zohran Mamdani endorsed three similarly radical candidates who swept House primaries, and two of them defeated sitting incumbents, including the chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and similar radicals wins have occurred in Colorado, Michigan, and other deep blue areas. It means now these have happened in safe Democratic districts. So it doesn't mean that the public is necessarily going along with this, but the grassroots, the base of the Democratic Party, definitely is. So they have been embracing radical positions, such as on Gaza and Israel, immigration enforcement, and economic populism. And I think it shows that the establishment in the Democratic House leadership, traditional labor unions, and pro Israel donors are now weaker than they were a few years ago when more moderate candidates usually prevailed. This is significant for the Democratic Party's internal identity and future presidential primaries. It doesn't necessarily translate into general election wins in competitive districts.
So you don't think that
on
the
a shift to
socialists,
the left in safe Democrat seats.
so you don't think that the socialist Democrats are gaining traction when it comes to the average American or the base Democrats there? Because even on the mainstream media, there's a lot of talk about socialism and how it's bad. This must mean it's affecting a lot of Americans, isn't it?
I don't agree with your premise that the mainstream media in America is saying that socialism is bad. Maybe parts of it are.
Yes, agreed.
A lot of influential magazines in our culture, such as Rolling Stone, are cheering, and The Nation, and the New Republic are cheering it on unabashedly. So. It is being pushed back against by some of the more moderate members of the mainstream media. I don't think that the public is necessarily sold on it, but I've been wrong about things before, and we're going to have to see what happens in the midterm elections in November. Maybe there will be a breakthrough, but I think outside of safe Democratic jurisdictions, it's unlikely to happen.
Okay, Ms. Chapman, back to you again. Do you think that the Democrats currently are benefiting primarily from the dissatisfaction with the Trump administration, or are they developing a stronger political message of their own, especially these young, social democrats? Are they appealing to the average young American?
Yes, actually, Ms. Raham, both are true. There is a great deal of dissatisfaction with President Trump's policies on both sides of the political aisle. And at the same time, this has created an opening for the Democrats to refine their message. Previously, they were running on an anti-Trump message. Their entire platform was, we don't like Trump. Now they've refined their message, as Mr. Vadum notes, an economic populism message, an anti-corporate message, social protection for vulnerable members of society, not cutting Medicaid and health benefits. So the Democrats have been able to refine their message in contrast to Trump rather than simply running on "we hate Trump." This is making it more complicated for Republicans. One note, the term socialism is not as scary to Americans as it used to be perceived as being. Many Americans view the Democrats as socialist anyway, and the term communism is also not as scary as it used to be. And this is because when people dig down into the individual issues, such as crony capitalism, the social safety net, then the terms socialism, communism lose their political impact. One term that still scares Americans is the word fascism. On both sides of the aisle, Democrats think the Republicans are fascists who are going to take away all of their rights, whereas the Republicans view the government itself as a fascist deep state that is going to surveil and take away Republican guns and rights. So fascism is still a scary word in American politics. People are getting used to socialists and Democrat socialists. But what we are seeing is, and to get back to your question, the Democrat message is also an anti-establishment, anti-incumbent message. We're seeing a
Do you think someone like Mamdani played a role in this? Like he made the idea of socialism more popular?
Yes, and Mamdani has played a role in this, and it's not just his message of socialism. Many of his voters doubted whether Mamdani could accomplish some of his goals, such as free bus rides, free daycare, because they know that depends on the state institutions, not just on the mayor of New York. However, he has paved the way for more socialist candidates, as we're seeing in Michigan, in Minnesota, but ultimately, Mamdani's tenure in New York is highlighting that regardless of the label, the candidate still has to get through the establishment, the wheels and machinery in the state house, in the state capitals, and overall, the broader electorate curbs any extreme programs, whether it's socialism or whether it's unconditional war, unbridled war on the part of Republicans. So socialism for the Democrats, that gets curbed by the broader electorate, the same way that unconstitutional, unbridled war on the part of the Republicans will get curbed by the broader electorate. So actually what we're seeing is overall, for both Democrats and Republican voters, they are rejecting the establishment, the incumbents, the old manner of doing things, the big donor money, and voters on both sides of the aisle are experiencing a generational shift where younger voters want to know how the government is helping them, and they're rejecting this foreign policy, whether it's essentially voters on both sides want Republicans and Democrat leaders to focus on America and Americans rather than focusing on Europe, the Middle East. They want to elect people who will fix America.
What Trump ran on, basically.
I beg your pardon?
What Trump ran on as a candidate for presidency. Make America.
Well, and Trump didn't actually run on fixing America. He ran on making America great again. One thing that's very interesting, the moment Trump lost ground with Republicans is Operation Midnight Hammer. When Trump struck Iran in June of 2025, he lost independence. He lost men under 45. He lost the first-time voters and the swing voters that moved into the Republican camp.
Yes.
Trump, what he should have done was he should have consolidated his coalition. He should have preserved those voters. But instead, he hit Iran, and that's when Republicans started to lose on the generic ballot. And his actions after that, continuing to pursue a foreign policy, is what lost him younger Republican voters, because he turned his attention overseas. Any president that focuses on overseas wars always sacrifices their domestic agenda. For the Trump voters, it was particularly bitter because he ran on anti-war platform, and also many voters viewed Trump as their last chance to help America, which is why the disappointment and bitterness is particularly acute.
Okay, Mr. Vadum, let's get your take here as well. Now, you heard Ms. Chapman talking about the idea of a generational divide. where younger Americans don't feel like they have access to a lot of necessary things like medical care, good schooling, and so forth. And this is what's causing the divide within parties, the Democrats or the Republicans. Do you agree with this assessment? And do you think that this divide is a ruse, I suppose, to push these socialist Democrat candidates, for instance, further, make them more appealing? Or is there an actual aggressive divide within establishment parties?
I think there is a generation gap for sure among voters. The younger voters look at how their parents lived, how their parents were able to purchase housing fairly cheaply, and how groceries were cheaper, how, basically everything was cheaper when they were growing up. I know there's inflation, so obviously, prices have to go up over time, but still they feel that they have been younger people feel that they have been cheated out of their birthright, so to speak, and they're upset that they can't buy houses, and that life is so expensive. They look at rising healthcare costs, the skyrocketing price of health insurance, and they scratch their heads. They wonder if it's ever going to get better. And I think that that has contributed in large measure to the success of the Democratic Socialist wing of the Democratic Party. These dissatisfied young people have been voting for radical, candidates that even in Democratic districts would have had difficulty getting elected a few years ago. And yet, younger voters are flocking to them nowadays, and they tend to be turned off by Trump, especially as the other guest noted, because Trump turned his back on his no new wars pledge. And although I personally think the Iran war was a great idea and that Trump, shouldn't have backed off after 2 weeks, I guess I'm in the minority there, but it has dragged on, and his constant hemming and hawing and acting like Monty Hall from the 1970s game show Let's Make a Deal, trying to always, trying to negotiate with Iranians who clearly don't want to negotiate, has hurt Donald Trump's image as a decisive leader. I digressed a little bit, but I hope you'll.
But when you say, and you're saying there that you've described these socialist Democrat candidates as radical. But when you say that, like the average American or the average young American, feeling like they don't have access to housing, proper housing, medical care, and so forth, is generally a normal and acceptable demand, and that they are looking at this idea of socialism because they see, as you've said, wars in Iran, and they see this as a forever war that will end up, draining money into something other than America.
Well, socialism polls well in America, especially among Democrats, and especially among the subset of younger Democrats. And I don't. It would take another show to go into the reasons for that, but it does. It is less. It is more appealing than it was before, and as was noted, socialism is not the scary word. Is not the scary word that it used to be. People look at it as. As a practice. Some people look at it as a practical solution to today's problems, with which they blame on the status quo and on capitalism, unfortunately, and it's appealing to them, and they don't think of these ideas as particularly radical. They think of them as common sense, and but they are still among the voting public a minority, but they are dragging the Democratic Party farther to the left for sure.
Okay, Ms. Chapman, now Donald Trump continues to have enormous influence over the Republican primaries, but some of his endorsed candidates have failed to win. Is this an indication of his limits and the fact that, the MAGA base is feeling disillusioned by Trump?
Well,
Yes,
it depends.
Raymond.
Yes,
Okay.
Ms. Chapman.
Yes, Reham. What these primary elections show is that Trump is no longer the kingmaker within the Republican Party. And in some cases, for example, uh, in Michigan, where he has endorsed his longtime friend and ally, Mike Lindell, for governor, he was viewed as too extreme. Same thing in Texas. So what we're seeing is in areas where Trump endorses a Republican that is viewed as a bit too extreme, not electable amongst the general population of voters, that's where Trump's endorsement fails. However, in deep red areas, such as rural areas out in the countryside, strongly Republican areas, those are the areas where Trump's endorsed candidate tends to win the primary. And of course, the real test of Trump's endorsements is going to come in the general election in November. And we're going to see some seats that were viewed as safe Republican seats, such as Iowa. The Democrat running in Iowa for Senate, Sherrod Brown, he was very unpopular. However, Trump's endorsed candidate wound up being even more unpopular, so now it appears Sherrod Brown might win in Iowa. So the races are very highly specialized. It's really a seat-by-seat basis, and it's heavily dependent on local issues. Mm-hmm. And previously, whenever an opponent wanted to weaken a candidate, they would tie them to national issues. So a Democrat that wants to run against a Republican will try to tie that Republican to the national issues of war, immigration, Medicare spending, the loss of safety nets. Whereas to gain strength, the candidate relies on local issues. So issues such as the local school board, the local, essentially local politics wins for candidates, and right now focusing on national issues will lose for those candidates. And many Democrats are going to try to tie Republicans to Trump, yes, and to the Iran debacle, the Iran catastrophe.
So, Ms. Chapman, do you think that possibly young Americans, whether they're Republican or Democrats, may share certain grievances, as you said, when it comes to schooling, healthcare, and this might decide who wins and who doesn't? It's not necessarily a Republican-Democrat situation. It's about who's going to offer me the better services?
Exactly. Our country is moving from a right-left Republican-Democrat divide into generational, the old boomers versus the younger millennials, the establishment, the incumbents versus up-and-coming candidates. And the up-and-coming candidates are running on many messages. It could be socialism, it could be anti-Zionism, but they're essentially pushing their candidates to help them. And as your other guest mentioned, affordability, housing is unaffordable, food prices never went down after COVID. So we're seeing food inflation on top of previous inflation, and also a sense that the establishment incumbents are doing the work of their donors. They no longer care about the ordinary voters. This goes back to the Supreme Court case, Citizens United, which allowed big money into elections 10 or 15 years ago, which led to an immediate effect of politicians working for their donors instead of working for their voters. Mm-hmm. This plagues both parties, and as we're seeing, Reham, as you mentioned, this is a generational divide. Young Republicans are turning against the endless wars in the Middle East. They're turning against foreign policy. They're turning against America being beholden to Israel rather than Americans. And on the Democrat side, we're seeing the young Democrat voters. They want their politicians to work for them rather than giving all of taxpayer money to programs overseas while young Democrats are at home and can't get medical care and can't afford houses. I'm not as well versed on the issues facing the Democrats as I am on the issues facing Republicans, but there is a deep discontent in America amongst Americans, and they are angry with both parties.
Mr. Vaden, what about you? Let's get your take here. Could the Republican primary results represent the beginning of a debate inside the party about how closely candidates should remain tied to Trump ahead of the general elections? You heard Ms. Chapman there talking about a deep dissatisfaction with the average American.
I don't think the primary results for Republican candidates reflect that. Trump's endorsement success is in this cycle is around 97%. Yeah, there have been some high-profile losses, but overall, he's batting close to 1,000 there. The real test is what happens in the general election, and given the number, the low approval ratings for Trump, presidential approval ratings heavily influence getting people to actually go to polls and vote. If Donald Trump is not popular, then it's going to depress Republican turnout. So even if people actually support Trump or Republicans, they're just not going to be as motivated to go to the polls. Also, the fact that this is an off-year election in November 2026, there's no presidential election. Presidential elections are exciting, and people are go to the polls because it's important to them to see who's going to be leading the country. Off-year elections are a harder sell for most people, so that is probably going to hurt Republicans in terms of turnout in November. I think that some Republicans are rethinking how closely they should be tied to President Trump. His behavior, according to a lot of Republicans, especially conservatives, has been quite, erratic. His pushing for high tariffs constantly, while some justify it on the grounds of, nationalism, or more precisely, economic nationalism. Conservatives generally understand that a tariff is a tax, and contrary to what President Trump has been saying, that it's only the foreigners who pay these taxes before they come to America. Any economist will tell you that's not true. The consumer is, and the end user is paying these taxes. So Donald Trump has imposed a big tax hike on Americans, which puts Republicans in a strange situation, because Republicans are the party traditionally of cutting taxes, not of raising taxes. And now they're in a situation where the Republican rank and file people want to be loyal to Trump because he's the leader of their party. And yet they don't like the fact that these tariffs, these taxes, have been imposed. So it puts the GOP in a confusing position, and to me, it suggests that turnout among Republicans is likely going to be depressed in November. Republicans make
do you think if Republican candidates change the messaging, not necessarily moving away from Trump, but saying that they're going to try to, bring down prices of staple goods, for instance, rent or whatever it is, or cut taxes, this may motivate voters to turn out?
Well, maybe. They did already cut taxes in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Donald Trump's party cut, taxes on tips, for example. So working people, waiters and waitresses, don't now have this huge exemption of taxes, a level they don't have to pay taxes on like the first $25,000 or something in tips. And there was other tax relief too, which has been good for people and has been good for the economy, but people are not really feeling it, and it makes them, depressed and long for change. And this cannot be good for the party in power, the Republicans and Donald Trump.
All right, thank you so much for your insights there. That was Matthew Valem from Washington, D.C. and Ginger Chapman from Washington. Thank you both for joining me here this evening on Think Tank, and thank you for your insights. That brings us to the end of this episode of Think Tank. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.